Imagine, just for a second, a race not for the stars, but for the actual circuitry of the human mind. For decades, one of the most devastating neurodegenerative diseases out there has slowly and mercilessly stripped away the motor control of millions of people. But right now, a high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar global competition is quietly unfolding behind closed doors. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're uncovering the secretive, dramatic, and absolutely crucial medical space race to permanently cure Parkinson's disease. Okay, let's dive into this because this story is just incredible. At just 22 years old, a patient known in clinical trials as Li Ding completely lost her motor control. She lived for 15 years in a state of severe, locked-in disability. But then she underwent a revolutionary cellular transplant, and her life literally changed overnight. Well, actually, scratch that. It wasn't overnight, but within just 3 short months, she regained her independence. She returned to her daily life. It's, quite frankly, a true medical miracle. So you're probably wondering, how exactly is this even possible? Well, our mission today is simple but massive. We're going to uncover the biological breakthrough that is finally offering a functional cure for Parkinson's, and we'll map out the intense trans-Pacific war to commercialize it. We're going to look at the hard science, the competing global strategies, and the staggering geopolitical race that is fundamentally reshaping modern medicine right before our eyes. Just look at this headline for a moment from South China Morning Post. This is the news behind today's video. China outpacing the US in biotech race to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. A leading Chinese neurologist says publicly available data shows a clear lead in the development of stem cell treatments. With that said, let's go straight to the intro. The algorithm buries channels that show the truth like mine every single day. The only thing that fights back is you. One like, one subscribe, turn on the bell icon. That's how the truth about China survives on YouTube. Don't let it disappear. Thank you very much. To really understand the cure, we have to quickly touch on the biological mystery itself. Parkinson's is caused by the death of dopamine-producing nerve cells in the brain. Now, for half a century, we've relied on drugs like L-DOPA. But here's the thing, they only mask the symptoms temporarily. It's like putting a bucket under a leaky roof. They don't replace dead neurons, and over time, their effectiveness just completely fades away. Let's move to see how this builds, because this is where it gets incredibly futuristic. We are now creating living therapies. Scientists take adult donor cells, like skin cells or blood cells, and literally reprogram them into stem cells. They then coax these to become dopaminergic progenitors. Then, using ultra-precise robotic surgery, they implant them directly into the patient's brain. Finally, the cells mature, integrate, and biologically restore that missing dopamine. It's mind-blowing. For decades, we relied on those temporary pills that eventually lead to severe involuntary movements. But now, we are officially entering the neuron repair era. Think about that. We aren't just managing the decline of a dying brain. We are biologically replacing what is lost. We are permanently restoring dopamine signaling right at its anatomical source. It is a total game changer. And this brings us right to the global race. Meet contender number 1, Japan. Japan has taken a massive, highly conditional leap forward. In March 2026, they set a regulatory and commercial milestone that was so shocking, it caught the entire medical world completely off guard. $350,600 per patient. Yep, that is the staggering price tag for Japan's conditionally approved, off-the-shelf therapy Amchapri. I mean, to put that into perspective, that number firmly establishes just how immense the financial stakes are in this regenerative medicine market. The potential here is astronomical. So how did Japan get to market so incredibly fast? Well, the therapy delivered a remarkable 44% average increase in dopamine levels, but their strategy is undeniably aggressive. They accepted data from a really small, early-stage trial of just 7 patients to grant conditional approval. The catch? They require a super strict 7-year post-marketing period to definitively prove long-term safety. It's a bold, controversial precedent. Now we pivot to contender number 2, the West. Western programs, specifically those from Rock Therapeutics and Cellular Intelligence, are taking a very different path. Their approach relies on a much slower, highly methodical, and rigorously tested scientific strategy. They are playing the long game. So the crucial point is how regulation totally dictates this slower pace. Western therapies have to navigate the rigid Section 351 bottleneck. This is a massive, resource-draining pathway that mandates huge trials for safety and efficacy spanning multiple years. We're talking about a process that can take up to a full decade before therapy actually reaches the patients who so desperately need it. And the West faces a massive biological dilemma too. Do you use a patient's own reprogrammed cells? Doing that avoids immune rejection, sure, but it costs an absolute fortune to manufacture for every single individual. Or do you use off-the-shelf donor cells? Those are scalable, they're cheaper, but they require patients to take heavy immunosuppressants. It's a really tough choice. To fix this exact problem and bring those huge production costs down, the West is deploying artificial intelligence. Yep, AI. Firms are using AI foundation models to figure out the perfect process parameters to manufacture these living cells reliably and at commercial scale. It's a highly calculated, technology-driven solution to a massive biological bottleneck. But while the West is busy scaling up using AI, the global drama escalates even further with contender number 3, China. China has rapidly emerged as a major global force here, wielding a truly disruptive edge in both biological efficiency and highly aggressive regulatory frameworks. And this brilliantly illustrates the technical gap currently defining the race. According to the report, the Trans-Pacific Regenerative Medicine race, while the Western average for cell purity sits around 50 to 60%, Chinese teams, specifically neurologist Zhang's team, are shattering international benchmarks with efficiencies over 80%. This staggeringly high purity means much more potent transplants and a drastically lower risk of tumors for the patient. And China paired this massive biological edge with a radical regulatory revolution. Through their Order 818 dual-track system, qualified hospitals can run early trials, prove safety, and totally bypass that standard 5 to 8 year drug registration delay. They are effectively commercializing and charging for treatments in just 14 months. They are getting these therapies to patients years faster than anyone else. Let's bring all this data into sharp focus. As detailed in the Trans-Pacific Regenerative Medicine race, we have 3 incredibly distinct strategies. Japan leads commercially with conditional approvals at a very high price point. The West is methodically pushing through traditional massive trials. And China, they are rapidly deploying highly pure therapies through their accelerated hospital translation pathway. 3 completely different ways to solve the same problem. So why does this race matter so much? Because behind the billions of yen is a massive human cost. Data from Cellular Intelligence and IndexBox shows that 10% of Parkinson's patients, that's over 1 million people, are diagnosed before age 50. They face decades of progressive decline. It's an unfolding human tragedy and, honestly, an economic reality, driving a projected $16 billion market by 2034. As we look to the future, here are the absolute crucial next steps all these contenders must clear to make the neuron repair era a scalable reality. 1. Scaling cleaner manufacturing without losing that precious cell purity. 2. Proving long-term graft survival in a diseased brain. 3. Passing rigorous sham-controlled trials. And finally, establishing insurance reimbursement for therapies that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a tall order. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profound question it leaves us with. Will the West be able to use its AI foundation models to overcome those massive regulatory bottlenecks and catch up to China's efficiency? Or is this trans-Pacific race already won by the East? Biology is no longer destiny, it's design. What do you think? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you learned as much as I did. Goodbye.